have to tell me all of the inner content. You're welcome to tell it, but you don't have to tell it. You can tell me I'm working on a problem, and don't tell me any more than that. And the rest of it will be the inner process that, you know, I've got a lot of things going through my head, or there's a certain place where I'm scared or whatever. And you never tell, we're never going to know if it's a problem at work or in your marriage or at home or with your kids or where.
I do have an issue that I need to work on, and this might be a good time to take a look
There
at
it
that
is.
then.
Absolutely.
I'm just finishing, I'm a returning student, and I'm finishing up a master's degree in counseling and started doing my practicums. And with clients, I'm finding like I have this issue about, when it's time for them to look at something difficult, or I have a hard time, I don't want to hurt them, I don't want to hurt their feelings,
Yes,
that
yes.
I don't want them to not come back.
Yes,
and
yes.
I need to work on that. But that's an issue that I realized that I was watching Oprah one where she called it the disease to please. I don't want to hurt someone's feelings.
Yes.
But if it's going to be my job to help people to look at difficult issues, I need to be able to do that.
So there's something about looking at difficult issues, which you feel when you're helping someone do it, and which you also feel about this issue, the way you started to say, okay, maybe it's time I look at it. So there's something about looking at difficult issues. Is that right?
Yeah.
That's in itself difficult. To look
Right.
at difficult issues brings something.
It does. Uncomfortable.
And how uncomfortable there. Well, now she made my life easy, right? Because the hard thing would be to help people sense that thing you're calling uncomfortable, and you've already got it there, right? So, and you know a lot of what's in that, obviously, because you said some of it, but don't go by that. Just let the uncomfortable be here. And give that uncomfortable some ease and some space, and sort of ignore me, I'm fine, and be with your uncomfortable enough so that you get some room. And then don't just fall in there and be utterly uncomfortable, sort of say, well, there's my uncomfortable. Can you do that? Oh, there it is. Is it that? And so we have you and the uncomfortable. We don't just have the uncomfortable taking over. We have you and me and the uncomfortable. Can we be like that for a minute? Yeah? And there should be a breath that would come of all this space here, room here, peace here, time here for me and this uncomfortable. So I'm not immediately taken over. I don't have to run away from it. There it is, and it's there, and I'll go in there, but in a minute, not now. Can you do that? So not now. In a minute or 2 or 5 or something, we'll go there. But right now we're just making a space, we're making room for it. So we say, yes, there is that uncomfortable. It's certainly there. It's there. It's there. Okay. Yes, it's there. Okay. All right. So that would be like the first step, is to make that. Now there's the breath. See? Okay. Right. So let the breath be. Now shut up for a minute and see if you can maintain that. You're there and it's there. And in a minute we'll go in, but not right away. So what's that like? The reason I'm asking this for them, so ignore it if it doesn't fit. If you feel like saying what it's like, do it, not ignore it.
If I could put a feeling to it, or like a texture, it's hard.
It's hard. Okay, and again, she's making life easy for me, okay? Those who don't focusing understand what I mean. It's like I would have usually had to explain what kind of thing I want here, and that's exactly, it's hard. The quality of it is hard. Something is hard. And do you mean it's hard to keep that space there, or do you mean that the uncomfortableness has a hardness to it?
The uncomfortableness has a hardness to it.
So be very gentle now with this hardness. And if you can, be a little glad that you got this far. Sort of, oh, it has a hardness. Those of us who know focusing will see, well, that's a very essential step here, just to sense that hardness. It's its own hardness. The hardness knows why it's hard. And we only think we can guess a moment, but the hardness knows why it's hard. Be gentle with it. And if something flows inside, allow it to do that. There's a hardness. If the hardness tells you something, you don't have to say it right away. Keep it nice and private. There is a hardness there. It's a kind of very gentle way of being interested in what the hardness is, or not pushing it. If it wants to, it will tell you.
You know what came to my mind almost right? It's like it's there for a reason.
It's there for a reason.
I mean, that's just...
Oh, that's wonderful. That's a little focusing step. See, that's a little typical focusing step. It's like if somebody from the other people would come and say, what have you learned now? You wouldn't know. And yet, that's a focusing step. That's a focusing step. It's there for a reason. And it came sort of to you to think that. So let's check that. Can we say to it, are you there for a reason? If you're sort of wondering, is that right? Is it there for a reason?
But when if I go into myself and ask myself that, yeah, it's very comfortable that that's there. I mean, it's just like that felt right.
Okay, all right. So it's like a little bit, it was a conversation between what you think, and you certainly think it's there for a reason, and it sort of said, kind of, it feels like, yeah, that's okay to say. It's all right to say that it's there for a reason. It doesn't mind us saying that. It even maybe likes us saying that. It's there for a reason. There's that breath again. Let's she's really down there. And so gently now, see if you can have an attitude that that's already a lot. We're going to go further, but it will help to say that's already a lot, so that we don't push it, sort of. We're there, and if it wants to say more, we'll be very pleased. But if it didn't want to say more, that would be all right. Yeah?
Yeah, it wants to say more now. It wants to say stop.
Okay, all right. That was so clear and so lovely. And so we stop, okay? I mean, no matter how much your intellect wants to go on, when it says stop, we stop. But don't run away right away. Just sense that you had the power to stop, that you're glad to stop because it says that you're getting a kind of inner response, and it's a sort of gladness I'd like you to have before we actually stop. Can you do that for a minute? Oh, it's really speaking to me. I can go with that.
That is really, I want to say interesting, but that's not the surprising.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
That's surprising, because when Dora Lee was up here before, and she was doing this with, I don't know, Osmo. I was sitting there going, what? What's that? And she was up here being, happy about it, and I wasn't getting it, and I'm feeling that just clear as a bell inside.
Yeah.
I would like it, if you would, if we all stood up for a minute to make a distinction between the inner space of a human being and all this rattling talk that we're going to do now about it. Because that was a wonderful example, and I really don't know what was going on. I want to tell you that it can take quite a bunch of days or quite a lot of times with a person, a few months very often, to get to the point where she started. Okay? Because otherwise this will not illustrate anything. Do you understand me there? Yeah. Okay, now I have to say that again to the new people. It may take you a few months to find what she began with, this discomfort that actually had a quality to it. It was called hardness. It had a quality of its own. To get to that can take you a few months, and there's nothing wrong with that. Some of our very best focusing teachers took quite a long time to find this. It doesn't matter how long it takes to find it. Once you find it, you have it, just the same as anybody. That's really important. Otherwise, this looks just sort of like, well, what was that? And when this happens to me in other groups, not here, but in other groups, people always think it must have been a plant.
Well, my question is, what do you mean by actualizing it? Well, just...
You mean the part about action?
Action.
Yes. I was there trying to say that when focusing really works for you, before that I don't have anything special to say, but when it really works for a person, there is a tendency to be with what that brings, which is a great deal, and to forget about taking action steps in your life. To get to the point where you're making the phone calls that you need to make. It was a simple concept of ordinary action. To do the inquiring into new territory that you need to do, to actually go on a trip, to actually meet people. That's what I meant by action.
When does that,
when does that come?
Yeah, when does that come?
Well, that's why people are laughing. I mean, that's the problem. That is a question to ask. It's the right question. I'll give you an answer, but that's just momentary. The question is, when and where does action come in with focusing? Do you follow me? Okay, now if you're new to this, you don't yet see the problem. The problem is that focusing brings you very deep, and it opens a whole lot of things, and then that's so precious that you're content with that. And in the action space, you don't change. And if you don't change in the action space too, then that limits the whole story. And when you are into all these big things that come through focusing, the action territory seems trivial and externalized and not very interesting, and yet without that, life does not expand. Now, am I making sense? Yeah. You have to understand that someone told me this 5 minutes ago, okay? But she said, in the focusing, we very typically ask ourselves, what would my body be like if whatever? And if she had difficulties, which she didn't, with the process, eventually I would have asked her, what would your body be like if you were not concerned with all of these things about hurting other people and all that stuff? What would your body be like? And then the body changes with that very often. And now Bala put in a link that you could do there. You could say, what action would I take if my body were like that? So maybe that's where the link is. But I don't know that. Someone told me that. Jason told me that 5 minutes ago. Okay, so don't take that. But it's a good example of something we need there. Yes, any other question? Particularly about what you just saw here. Did you see what I did? Because I did so little. And yet that little that I did is very important. And people tell me constantly, oh, it's your presence or this or that. Well, I'll talk about my presence in the afternoon. But look at the fact that I did some little tiny things that made that all come. What did I do? Did you see me do anything but say back the same thing? There's a question all the way in the back.
In your first response, you left out half of what she said. You left out the
3/4.
Afraid to hurt them.
Yes.
It seemed
Yes.
very different. I was wondering if you were aware of making a decision about that.
Yes, that's perfect. That's right. Okay, take the beginning and notice that I did something there. She had the beginnings of certain content there. I know I'm concerned about hurting people. I already know I'm concerned about doing well. This is my course. I'm concerned about how hard it is to touch something that's hard. You follow? She had content there. I was supposed to follow her in the content. Now, if this hadn't been a demonstration, if this had been a new client, I would have followed the content, because I would have left my bringing focusing in for 20 minutes later, okay? But eventually I would have done what you saw me do. I would have ignored the content and asked her what she has under it that's not so clear. You see? And that can be very hard to get, and I try for that, and then if it doesn't work, I try again the next hour. If I have a client who comes every week, I have time. If I'm supposed to teach somebody focusing right now and I'll never see them again, I do what you saw me do. I simply see if we can go right to the stuff that's under that content. And so what did I say to her, in fact, that brought that? I've forgotten. I know I said something.
You said exactly that. You said something. You said, she said a lot without the word something in it.
Yeah.
And when you said back a little piece.
There is
you
a
said,
something.
So there's something about, and then
Yes.
you also made this gesture.
That's right. I said there is something, and there is something that does that.
Mm-hmm.
And I probably repeated her name for that. So I said there is something that makes it hard to look at difficult things. Yes, that was her name for the whole problem. So I took her name for the whole problem, and I said there is something that makes this. That's one thing I did, and I always do that. There is a something. So if you're trying to learn focusing and you tell me you saw a movie that you loved, I say there is something in you that loves that movie. See, there is something. That helps people turn. But it's not just a word, it's an invitation to the person to sense the body that's carrying that problem. And she did that instantly, and I turned to you and said, now she made my life easy, because that doesn't work so fast. There was a second question like that.
Well, I had a question too when you were talking about breathing, and it seemed to me that
Yes.
you led her with taking a deep breath and letting it out, and then just very shortly, there it is, and she did that.
Yes.
Was that a deliberate or a technique that one should use?
No. Thank you. No, thank you for pointing to that. No, it was more like in focusing, breaths come. I don't know the relationship between that and the many ancient and current methods for using the breath to get there. I don't know that relationship. There's bound to be one. The way I do is I don't make suggestions in that sense. I just found myself saying something like that. What I was doing is I was trying to create a moment in which that would come home to her, sort of. And my way of expressing that happened to be, oh, there ought to be a good breath here for you, or something like that. But I didn't mean go look for a breath. I meant, let's stay here for a minute until you can feel like, oh yeah, that really was something that happened here, that came here. And then indeed, I do the second half of what you saw me do. When a breath comes, I point it out to the person. Because when we're deep in focusing, we don't notice that. And yet it's good to notice, oh, I just had a breath, what that feels like, because it's a sign in focusing that something is coming, that it's a right step when you get that involuntary, yeah, breath. And sometimes when I work with somebody like this, I get a breath like that when she's there, and I realize she hasn't got it yet. So that's why it came out like that. You know, sometimes it's even funny. It's like you hear me breathing on the tape, and not the other person. So was that clear? Now, even if that wasn't, forget about breath for a minute, and let me say what I was doing was I was making a time for us to be there where we were instead of rushing on. That's what I was doing. Something happened. She got a name for the thing. And then it happened again when it said, There's a reason for it to be here. Well, that she knew already, I'm sure, or she wouldn't have started even to work on it. But when that thing said there's a reason for it to be here, and corroborated that, that was again a step. When we get a little step like that, it's good to stay there for a little while. Like a minute, or half a minute, or 3 seconds, or some kind of time. Not just to rush on. And that's what I was really doing. I was saying, oh, let's be here for a minute and be glad with that. And a typical sign for that would be for breath would come. Yes, what else? Question?
I'm wondering, could you say something about the content you had? You had said that if you were seeing her 5 or 6 times, you
I would have.
Stayed with contact.
Yes.
Why is that helpful?
Well, first of all, most people don't so quickly go to focusing. So I usually, typically in a first time with someone, if I'm not teaching focusing, okay, it's better to let them be more active instead of me leading. So I would have said back to her, well, you already know certain things about this. You feel yourself carrying these things so you're not so free with a client, and you wish you were free. And then she would have said, no, that's not exactly right. It's more like this. And I would have said, oh, it's more like this. Or I would have said back to her, you're worried about hurting them, and also you want to do well. And then she would have said, yes, and besides, furthermore, there's this piece. And then I would have said, oh, yeah, there is that piece. And then she would have said, well, it's not exactly like that. It's a little different. And then I would have said, oh, I see, it's a little different. And we would have gone into it together. Does that make sense? And I could have said, well, what's underneath all this here in your body? I could have done that 20 minutes later. Am I clear? Yeah. Now, that what I was just explaining, that's listening, we call it. It's client-centered listening. It's telling the person back what you feel they were trying to tell you. And typically you don't get that right away. They correct it. They say, it's not quite like this, it's more like that. And then all you have to do is say back, oh, it's more like that. And then they say, somebody heard me, you know, and there's a deepening in the body. And then there might be this little silence, and then you say, oh, and another thing about my problem is that, and then if you say back, oh, what you're trying to tell me is that, whatever, and they say, no, it's not quite like that, what I meant really is like this, and you say, oh, it's more like this, and then they say, or maybe they have one more correction, they say, no, it's more exactly like this and this, okay, you say, it's more like this and this, and again, they say, oh, that's been heard, and that process is it leads to focusing, sort of, or that's where focusing comes from, is at the bottom of that process, you see, because many people are through listening come to there, and many people don't. So originally we developed focusing for those people who stay on the surface and don't have this drop when you listen. Something else. Oh, he's got the microphone set up with different people.
I just wanted to add on to what you just said, that isn't that also something about helping the relationship between you get safer for the client?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. If see, when I sit down with a client, I will go wherever they go. I will go with them wherever they go. And I will use, sooner or later, everything I ever, no, that's not right. I have ready to use everything I ever learned. And focusing is only one of those things. If I'm supposed to teach focusing, then this is my only chance to show you this right this minute. So then I'm a little different. I try to go directly there. Even so, there's a relationship. And it was very vivid. Did you notice? I mean, we said hello several times, and there was something back and forth between us, and we got to connect very quickly. Sort of. But there's no question that if I listen and I go with the person, whatever they are saying, it builds a kind of safety of how we are together, and it's much easier to do that in there. That's also my chance to say, focusing happens within a relationship. It happens inside of you in this relationship. There are certain relational attitudes. Without that, focusing doesn't work. So if you're a client-centered person, don't go out and say there's client-centered therapy over here and focusing over here, and client-centered is relational and focusing is inside. That's all wrong. Focusing is only in a relationship. And the minute this doesn't work, you have to stop. I mean, if I had a tense person sitting there looking like, oh, how did I get here and what do I do now? I wouldn't give focusing instructions. I would fix it so that this gets straightened out first. Oh, you're not comfortable about this, or whatever, right? Oh, you don't have to say anything that you don't want to say. Does that make you comfortable? No, not yet. Oh, so what is it then? Why are you all twisted up? Or what's wrong with us here? Never do focusing if the relationship is off. Thanks for that one. What else? Well, what else did I do? Yeah.
Oh, yes. When she said that it wants to stop, and you said, "Oh, that's wonderful." So you made it, you were spontaneous, and
Yes.
You didn't just say, "Oh, it wants to stop," and let her continue. Can you
Yes.
comment on that?
Yes. Well, there's a lot in that, boy. Okay. One of the important things here is my gladness that something in her is guiding this. See? Because once we get that far, and sometimes can take a long time, like a year with somebody to get that far, that's okay. But once we get that far, I relax. It's like I'm getting instructions from inside. I don't have any more problems, right? That's all I need, is to get instructions from inside. Do I have to decide when we stop? Did you see I didn't have to decide when we stop? Isn't that wonderful? If I decide, who knows if I decide right or not? But when it comes from inside like that, I'm so pleased, and that was part of the pleasure that you saw. Oh, it's telling us what to do. Oh, great. So that was the personal side of it. Then the next point you're making is you were not neutral. You didn't just say back, oh, you feel that you want to stop, and let her go from there. You were so personally expressive. Okay, I let myself do that. I know that's right to do, because if a human being is here with more taking up more space, the whole thing works better. But I'm also on the lookout for where I might mess things up with that. Do you follow me? Mm-hmm. It could be that there was something that she would have wanted to say or do about this stopping, and when she saw how happy I was, then it couldn't come anymore. So there's something to know about that. There's a kind of dance that you have to know. On the one hand, everything we put in, it helps us be there, and that helps the process. On the other hand, everything we put in could close something down for the person, and so you have to dance back and forth on that. Now, did I get everything? There was a lot in that question. When it wants to stop, and I knew we had gone. You see, I was told to begin with, working on something that's hard to face is not an easy thing here. Did you all get that? And not only is it not easy to, she sat right down and said, there is an issue that it's about time I look at. Do you get that? That means I haven't looked at it yet. It's been there, and I've tried to look at it. Maybe I have looked at it, but all the same, there's something about looking at it. Then she said, the issue is that I feel so strongly that my client will have difficulty and get hurt looking at things like that. Did you get that? Okay. So this is not an easy thing. So when we go 3 steps into that, that's a lot, right? So when it says stop, even before it said stop, I already was going to say, now, you know, that's a lot. Is that okay? Is that really all right? Because, oh yeah, the big point I'm trying to make is it's more important for a person who's learning focusing, it's more important to experience the process. It's less important how much progress am I making today on this. You follow me? So to experience the process is much more important. And so I needed her to notice each time there was a step. I needed her to be glad with each step. I needed her to make a little room to be glad the step came, to notice the step, and thereby to become familiar with the process. Do you see what I mean? And there was a double job to do, which was to make that process unthreatening, to make that process safe. Because after all, the problem was to face things. You got it? So to show her that this process is safe and not scary was a job to do there. And I know what makes the process safe. It's when each time you feel totally in control, there it is, here I am. Once you have that, nothing is dangerous inside anymore. There it is, here I am. I can go or I can not go, right? I don't have to run home. It's fine to sit here. I don't have to push in. I'm going to sense, is it right to go further? If it's right to go further, I go. If not, I stop for today. Do you follow me? Now, anyone who's focusing knows that. But that's what makes that process feel good. It makes that process feel good even when the things we're working on don't feel good at all. Very painful things that could overwhelm you very easily, that even have overwhelmed you 50 times. If you once find this thing we call making a space, this first part of focusing, where you say, it's there, I'm here, I can sense it, I haven't lost track of it, but I'm not overwhelmed by it. I could be overwhelmed by it very easily, maybe, but I'm not. I know it's there, and I'm here, and I can go further into it, but right now I'm not doing it. And remember, I showed her that. I worked on that. Yeah, good.
To iterate what you were saying.
Who is speaking?
I'm right here.
Oh, you're there. The microphone makes it.
What you said about the process, and it's not important what you do, it's learning that, see, the process. What happened up there, it was like where I stopped, I needed to stop for today because this is hard stuff, and I'm aware of it.
Amen.
And I would need to be in a different place to go further, I think. But what was neat was that by what we did, the reason it excited me is because in having it and being able to relate to it, it opens the door for me to deal with it.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much for saying that.